We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello and booyah! Emphasis on the boo. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Reboots Month, and this week we are talking about the 2016 film Ghostbusters. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my Class 5 entity co-host, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
I am. I am pretty excited to talk about this one. This is a movie that I have watched many times.
Yeah, you told me before we even sat down, or we were planning this month, I should say, that you could do this podcast without rewatching this movie. You've seen it enough, you can recall the scenes, you probably know a Mark Strong award one on top of your head. You're pretty well versed in the 2016 Ghostbusters film, yes?
I am indeed, yes.
All right, so I know we can talk about your Ghostbusters fandom at large a little bit more, but it's safe to say your history with the 2016 film is you saw it in theaters, you've watched it many times since, you're a big fan. I also saw this movie in theaters, and I enjoyed it very much. I have owned it for a while. I haven't rewatched it, though, until preparing for this podcast. This is my first time watching it since theaters, and it was a good rewatch. I got a lot to talk about. I wasn't super hyped to see it in theaters simply because I, myself, Andrew, I'll have to admit this to you, I'm not the biggest Ghostbusters fan. I like the franchise alright, like the movies alright. I kind of grew up not really watching those first two movies a ton. I just, you know those movies through osmosis, through cable TV, seeing parts of them. And I have sat down and watched them beginning to end. Not something I revisit very often. I appreciate the certain jokes and the Bill Murray's performance, all that good stuff. But, we've established I'm more of a Men in Black guy.
Nobody's perfect.
But you, how would you sum up your Ghostbusters fandom, Andrew?
Ghostbusters has basically been a part of my entire life, for lack of a better way to put it. There was obviously the animated series was on, I believe started either just after or just before I was born. And I do believe my sister watched it some. I had toys from that. My dad obviously was a big fan of the movies and had video games. So, and then as I kind of grew up, obviously Power Rangers took hold, but then Ghostbusters just kept coming back. And Extreme Ghostbusters, which was a weird kind of legacy cartoon sequel to real Ghostbusters, came out in the mid to late 90s, and I remember watching that when it came out, and have just been a big fan. I've had costumes, I've had gear, I've had stuff on and off over pretty much my entire life. And so when this was gearing up to come out in 2016, I was pretty stoked to actually get a chance to watch a Ghostbusters movie in the theater. I had seen the original in theaters several times. I got to see it at Alamo a bunch of times. Pretty sure I hosted one at Alamo. Have also seen it at a bunch of other theaters. But, you've seen that movie. Seeing it on the big screen is cool, but, it's not a new experience. And so getting to see a new Ghostbuster movie on screen, which by 2016, I kind of assumed that wasn't going to happen because Harold Ramis had passed. And was just kind of stoked to kind of get to go in and watch a new movie. I was a big fan of all the people involved, especially Paul Feig, the director / co-writer. So, yeah, for, you think about things that have been constants pretty much your entire life. Ghostbusters is oddly one of those things for me, where it's just kind of always been there, one way or another.
Ghostbusters and Ninja Turtles. It's the Andrew Williams story.
Basically.
Well, our theme this month, like I said in the intro, is reboots. We're focusing on films that were intended to reboot a franchise, but of course, weren't super well received upon their release. We're going to dive in and find all the positives. Originally, when we were planning out this month, it was going to be reboots and remakes. We were open to both of those types of movies. And once we narrowed it down to the ones we were going to cover, we realized, wait a minute, these are all reboots. So we're going to make the theme reboots. But it's a tricky thing sometimes figuring out what's a reboot and what's a remake. I think with this movie, Ghostbusters, it's the same concept, but the fact is they're not recreating the same story with the same characters.
Right.
Therefore, it's a reboot. That's fair, right?
Yeah, that's kind of how I viewed it. Is it's a, it's not remaking. It's not like a retelling of that same story. Obviously, there's similar DNA just by the nature of what the setup has to be. But our villain here is not Gozer. We're not seeing kind of a rehash of those concepts. Instead, we're seeing a similar story of these people coming together, but they're facing a much different situation. And so I very much classify it as a reboot instead of a remake.
How about, I'm trying to think of some tricky ones for you. How about Rob Zombie's Halloween? Reboot or remake?
I would probably call that a remake.
It's the same story, same character. Even though it
Same
expands the
general
story.
idea.
Yeah,
It expands the story, but you're still getting essentially the plot of the first Halloween.
Okay. Fair enough. I'll keep quizzing you on
That movie is still Laurie Strode versus Michael Myers.
Fair enough, Andrew. Well, we're not here to talk about Halloween. Not yet.
Not yet.
Anyway, possibly coming for you during spooky season. But for now, we're talking about Ghostbusters, the movie that was released July 15th of 2016, made on a budget of $144 million. At the box office, it just brings in $229 million. Critically, it is very well received. It is certified fresh at 73%. Now, Andrew, we've talked a bit about what qualifies as a movie being poorly received for our show. And it's not an exact formula, but there's three things that we're looking at, right? We're looking at the critical reception, which is good in this case. We're looking at the box office, which 229 is nothing to sneeze at, but when your budget is 144 million, you're barely covering production or marketing costs. Yeah, there are no significant profit. So not a box office flop, but not a
you
hit
actually
either.
could. This lost $70 million according to Studio Insiders. So this is
okay. Well, there you go.
This is a loss. This was definitely not financially at the level they were hoping it would be at.
And the final pillar that we look at is a little bit more nebulous. It is just the internet/fan/public reception of a movie. And that is, by and large, why this movie soundly qualifies for our show. Now, let me put out this quick disclaimer here. I've got no doubt that there are people that watched this film. It's very key there. Actually watched it beginning to end and said, you know what? That wasn't for me. That wasn't good. That wasn't funny. I didn't like it. That's every movie. There's people that are going to watch it and don't like it.
Yep.
I fully acknowledge those people exist.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Everyone, it's been acknowledged? Okay. When the cast of this movie was announced, there was a large backlash because all of the leads are women. That's before a trailer dropped.
I'll go one further, Chris. The movie was announced as starring women before there was a cast.
Oh wow!
It was announced. It was announced that Paul Feig was making a remake or a reboot of Ghostbusters that was going to star women. That was the original news bite that was released. And as you said, that was met with a very heavy response.
Yeah, and it only snowballed from there. As trailers came out, cast was announced, movie was
announced, everything, yeah.
And it was very evident in online discourse, in review bombing. The audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is way lower. So, again, I acknowledged that I'm not saying every single person who doesn't like this movie is misogynistic or racist, but it's undeniable that there was a strong, vocal internet presence full of misogyny and racism. It's documented. It happened. It's rough. We're not going to jump into it. That's not what our
No.
podcast is about, but we have to acknowledge it because it's a big reason why this movie is here with its own episode.
Yeah, it's like I said, Paul Feig makes a certain style of movie. Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig tend to do certain styles of comedy. If those styles of comedy are not your cup of tea, they're not for everyone. There are things Melissa McCarthy has done that I think are absolutely hilarious. We'll talk about some of those more in a little bit. She's done things where I'm like, I will probably never watch this again. So, like I said, we're not saying that there's no that this movie is above reproach. That was another thing that kind of got thrown around a lot. We're just saying that there was a thread that pretty much appeared from the minute the movie was announced that came from having seen nothing about it. And it continued, and it became kind of a weird self-fulfilling prophecy once the movie was released. But like you said, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the positives of this movie, which are immense, Chris.
I agree, Andrew. Let's look at the creative team behind this. The movie was written by Katie Dippold, who also wrote the film The Heat and is a writer on the upcoming Haunted Mansion. They've got a new one of those coming out next year. Also a writer on TV, wrote for Mad TV for a long time and several episodes of Parks and Rec. So very well accomplished. Lots of credits in the comedy genre. And she co-wrote this movie, of course, with our director, like you mentioned, Paul Feig.
Yeah, Kate Dippold is great. I've liked varying degrees of things she's done. I think The Heat was a fun movie. She's worked with Paul Feig more than once at this point. But Paul Feig is somebody that I think everybody knows one way or another. But he really kind of blew up in... He'd been in a lot of things. You've seen him in acting things probably long before you ever found out that he directed things. But when Bridesmaids kind of comes out in 2011, which he is not a writer on, just directs it. That's actually written by one of our stars, Kirsten Wiig, and Annie Momolo. But when Bridesmaids blows up, like that gives a big kind of resurgence and kind of push for him to be a big director. And it leads to several high-profile things, including Heat. But after this was announced, he had a movie called Spy that was released. And I just want to take this moment to say that Spy is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. It's
so good.
Absolutely hysterical. That one's written solely by Paul Feig and directed by him, but it's Melissa McCarthy, Jason Statham, Rose Byrne, Bobby Cannavale, Allison Janney, Jude Law, Miranda Hart. Like, it's a loaded cast, and it's absolutely hysterical. Jason Statham that's the exact type of character I wanted to see him play at that point. Like
100%.
like the meta awareness of Jason Statham, kind of. But that movie came out and I saw it, and that was the moment where I was like, oh, yeah, like I'm in. Like any lingering doubts I may have had were gone at that point, and I was like, I'm all in. It was fantastic.
Rose Byrne has a line in that movie. She says it on the airplane. I really can't repeat it on the podcast, but I cry laughing at her delivery in that line. And I agree. The movie was a hit. It made money. It's not some like buried gem, but I still think it's underrated. People don't talk about it enough. It's a very, very funny action comedy.
Yeah, and then he even followed Ghostbusters with a weird kind of black comedy thriller, kind of Hitchcockian aside thing called A Simple Favor with Blake Lively and Anna Kendrick that I actually thought was really good. And then even his acting stuff. I actually remember one of the first things I remember ever seeing him in was Heavyweights, the summer camp movie with Ben Stiller. He plays the thin counselor who lost all the weight, and obviously one of the biggest things that I think people may not have realized is Freaks and Geeks. He's the creator of that show.
I did not know that until I was getting ready for this. You just think of that as a Judd Apatow thing because like his name's attached to it and all the creators that are in the cast. But I had no idea that he created that show.
And So it was always, again, we're not going too deep into it, but it's always a little strange to me when people were like, Paul Feig doesn't get it. And I'm like, I don't know how you watch Freaks and Geeks and think that this is a guy who doesn't get it. Like the guy who knows what being that kind of fan or being the outcast or being the weird one. The dude gets it more than anything. And he's directed also bunches of television stuff, Arrested Development, The Office. He did Office Olympics. He did the performance review. He did Dinner Party, the very probably one of the more famous episodes of The Office, Dinner Party.
Yeah.
That was him directing it. He's done so much stuff, and he's so good, and he's so talented, and it was really kind of a bummer seeing people pretend that he wasn't. But tons of great work, and has a movie either coming out or has come out this year. So, yeah, Paul Feig rules.
You know, just another connection with The Office. Harold Ramis was a director on a lot of episodes of The Office, including some very big ones. The one where a bat gets loose in the office and Jim convinces Dwight that he's turning into a vampire. That was Harold Ramis. And Beach Day, also directed by Harold Ramis. So
yeah,
good stuff.
That was a fun. There was a period of time where two Office writers wrote a treatment for a third Ghostbusters, pretty much based off of Harold having worked with them on the episodes he did. That was kind of where that all came from, and I think those same writers ended up writing Year One, which was one of the last movies that Harold Ramis directed before he unfortunately passed away. But yeah, it's the lines go everywhere, man. Just like in this movie, the ley lines cross everywhere. The connections between all these people cross everywhere.
I think it's time we jump into it. You ready, Andrew?
I am.
Dr. Erin Gilbert is a professor up for tenure when her past comes back to haunt her. A book on the paranormal that she co-wrote with her childhood friend Abby resurfaces and ruins her reputation as a serious scientist. But when Erin, Abby, and her assistant Holtz capture evidence of ghosts, the three join forces as the Ghostbusters, with a mission to capture ghosts and prove to the world that they exist. After recruiting Metro agent Patty to the team and hiring the dim-witted Kevin as a secretary, the team faces their biggest threat in the form of an outcast named Rowan, who hatches a scheme to free thousands of lost souls onto New York City. Apocalyptic, I believe is how it was described in this movie.
Sounds like Ghostbusters to me, man.
Yes, it does, and we're going to talk all about it, starting with the cast of the film. And as always, we're going to start with the high point, with the best casting and best performance of the movie. Every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty with their performance, that they actually raise the quality of the entire film. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, kick us off here. Who gets your Mark Strong Award for Ghostbusters?
I think this is one that's, it seems a little easy if you're a fan of the film, but it was seen by many as definitely one of the breakout performances, and I think even some of the harsher critics still acknowledge that this was kind of a star-making performance, but I have to go with Kate McKinnon as Dr. Jillian Holtzman.
Yes, 100,000%. I'm going to gush about her very much on this episode. I'm going to let you go first, but I just want to say I agree. Also getting my Mark Strong Award.
We follow a similar format with a lot of these characters where they're all kind of filling different roles. Like you have one that's kind of deadpanning versus the others, but she's got this wonderful mad scientist energy that's very funny. First and foremost, it works for the character. She plays it to perfection. But by and large, it is just fantastic. Like, honestly, it's genuinely, I think, one of the things that kind of puts her on the map in a big way. And I think it was always kind of seen as one of those potential dark horse performances of somebody being able to kind of shine. Because obviously, by this point, Melissa McCarthy and Kirsten Wiig, those are your known quantities. Everybody knows who they are. Everybody is well aware of what kind of abilities they're bringing to the table, and no disrespect to them. We'll talk about them in a minute. they're both playing it not too far outside of their prototypical wheelhouse. But for McKinnon, this was a chance to really kind of crush it on a big scale, and she nails it in every single conceivable way. Like I said, there's literally not, when she is on screen, it is fantastic.
Yeah, man, I agree. I could talk about this forever. This was my introduction to Kate McKinnon. I don't really watch SNL. I got a hot take about it. I guess I don't need to share, but not a big SNL fan. I never saw her there. So I walk into this movie and I am just immediately captivated by what she's doing, by her look, by her delivery of every line. We've seen quirky characters before. A lot, actually. We've seen tinkerers that have like little gadgets, and she somehow carves out her own performance and her own character in this supporting character role that we've seen a bunch of times. And I was captivated. She gets the biggest laughs out of me, and I have a bit of a crush on her starting with this movie. I freaking love Kate McKinnon. You called it a breakout performance, and I agree. I think a lot of people took notice. I wish she was in like 50 more movies after this. She's still working, still getting plenty of roles, still getting high profile stuff and starring in things. She was in Masterminds the same year, which I think is a very underrated comedy with Zach Galifianakis and Jason Sudeikis. Got just a murderer's row in that cast. Very funny. She was in Bombshell, a little bit more of a high profile and serious role. She's going to be in the upcoming Barbie, which I know we are both very hyped for. So
Day one.
So she's still crushing it. I absolutely love Kate McKinnon. When we jump into scenes, I guess I get to gush about her some more, but she's oh man, she's the best. She played Carol Baskins in a movie this year, Joe versus Carol. I didn't see that one. That's not really my story, but I love this woman. I'm glad that you also picked her. Big emphatic Mark Strong award.
It's just fantastic. She also got to be Miss Frizzle on a reboot of the Magic School Bus.
Oh, that's fun. I can picture that.
She's been in everything. I even remember seeing her in like Office Christmas Party, which, you know, it's a perfectly fine addition to anybody's Christmas movie viewing canon. But again, she's the definition of somebody who absolutely never phones it in. You know, the movie itself may not be working or firing on all cylinders, but she is giving it everything that she has. I believe her work on SNL follows a very similar trajectory. I know SNL has had its ups and downs for many years now, but she was another one that anytime she was on screen, she was nailing it. There is a very I don't know if you've seen these, but there was a very famous set of sketches where her, Cicely Strong, and a kind of rotating third person, usually Ryan Gosling, but kind of depended, were people who were abducted by aliens and sharing their stories with government officials. And
I have not seen this.
I have to send you these because they are fantastic. But the first two, usually Cicely and Ryan Gosling, are telling these stories about, you know, these aliens welcomed me in and they like bathed me in light and it felt so beautiful. And she's just like, I don't know what happened to you guys, but I was in a cold, dark room where a bunch of aliens were coming around. Like, it's a total contrast in just how it's presented. But I'll have to send them to you because they are absolutely hysterical, especially the first one. But yeah, she's fantastic. And I'm glad she's still out there. I'm glad she's, you know, still continuing to be a big thing. She's not finally, but she is leaving SNL. I believe this was her last season, the one that ended earlier this year, and so now she'll be moving on to kind of just, you know, as most people on SNL are, they kind of graduate off of SNL into their own kind of stardom, and I'm glad to see her making those moves.
The leap. I agree. Let's go through the rest of this cast. This insanely stacked cast. You mentioned Melissa McCarthy. She plays Dr. Abigail Yates, or Abby, in this movie. And what is there to say about Melissa McCarthy? She came up whenever we were talking on our bonus episode on Thor: Love and Thunder, and we're like, it's Melissa McCarthy. Like, she's hilarious. We praised Spy a ton already. She's the lead of that movie and a big reason why that movie works so well. She's what you just said about Kate McKinnon. In every movie she's in, she is crushing it, even if the movie around her isn't working, which has kind of been the case with some of her movies, but she always crushes it, and she's absolutely hilarious. I mean, what is there to say about Melissa McCarthy? She's hilarious.
Right. Like, she's another one that, like, obviously she was on Gilmore Girls for a really long time. I know she had another sitcom, Mike and Molly, for a long time, but she was another one that, like, Bridesmaids was kind of the big jump to film for her, it felt like. And then after that, she was in a slew of movies with, I mean, like you said, she's been in movies with pretty much everyone at this point. Has worked with Paul Feig several times. Has a bit of an understated performance I really like in a movie called St. Vincent with Bill Murray.
Yeah. That's a good one.
And Naomi Watts. I think that's a really good movie. She plays, like I said, it's still funny, but but definitely playing it a little bit more straight. Obviously, Spy. Like, I'm gonna have to watch Spy when we're done here because I have to revisit it now because it's so funny. And yeah, she was also just recently on a show Liz and I watched called 9 Perfect Strangers, which is a very strange show about 9 people who go to this weird health resort to get their lives back on track. And
featuring the greatest actor of all time, Michael Shannon, right?
Yes, Michael Shannon, the greatest actor of all time, as well as AMC mascot Nicole Kidman. And that. I don't know if that's a joke anybody understands, but I hope somebody does. But
been to the theaters, yeah, they do.
If they've been to an AMC theater, they know. But yeah, she's Melissa McCarthy. She's great. Like I said, I'm not going to pretend that her style of comedy is for everyone. I know it's not. I know things like Bridesmaids can be very grating to people, but I've rarely seen something she's in where I don't feel like she's at least giving it the best she's got, even if not quite everything else is clicking.
Kristen Wiig is Dr. Aaron Gilbert. It's an ensemble cast, but if there's a lead in this movie, it's going to be Kristen Wiig, and she is phenomenal, an alum of our show. We praised her on Wonder Woman 1984, and I'm going to say about most of these women, I wish they were in 50 more things. I wish she was in more leading roles, but she crushes it no matter where she is on the call sheet. MacGruber, one of my favorite comedies of all time. There was a Peacock series recently. Absolutely hysterical. I love this woman and everything that she does. She's so good at doing the, like, very understated. She'll slip in like a real quiet line at the end of someone else being absurd, and she just puts her own 2 cents at the end, and it's just an exclamation point of hilarity every single time. I don't know how to describe that little bit of comedy that she does.
Yeah.
It's just it's in the details, her comedy, and it slays me.
I agree. She's another SNL alum, mirroring obviously the original Ghostbusters, having a several SNL alums. I do have to shout out Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar,
Yes.
just because that is a movie she was in that came out last year. It was a pandemic release, but my God, I have never, ever seen a movie quite like Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. I don't think that I ever will again. And that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. I think it's just such a weird movie. It's her and Annie Momolo reuniting. They're the ones that wrote Bridesmaids. They get a different director this time around. But it's an absolutely ridiculous, wonderful, heartwarming espionage thriller. It's one of the strangest things I've ever watched, and I love it. But yeah, she's great. There are very few things, like she's another one that kind of made that jump from SNL kind of in the aftermath of Bridesmaids. And she's out there doing stuff all the time and doesn't limit herself either. That's a big thing too. Like, she'll do things like Ghostbusters or Zoolander 2 or like Barb and Star, but then she also does things like The Martian, where she's playing it completely straight, or something like Mother, which is a very strange Darren Aronofsky movie, where she's playing it completely straight. So like she can basically go wherever she feels like going and does a great job.
Andrew, speaking of playing it straight, Kristen Wiig was in a Lifetime movie
With Will
Ferrell called A Deadly Adoption, where
Yep.
it's your typical Lifetime soap opera-y drama, and they play it completely straight. But because it's Kristen Wiig and Will Ferrell, it's funny. It's such a strange, but they don't wink at the camera. They don't smile or nothing like that. I haven't watched the movie beginning to end. I know of it and I've seen parts from it, but just that concept alone, I find simply hilarious.
I do like the fact that not just like that feels like a joke, like that somebody thinks of, just like ah ha ha.
Yeah.
What if serious actors starred in a Lifetime movie and played it completely straight the whole time? And it's like they actually went and did it, and it's ridiculous. It's so strange. But like Will Ferrell and Kristen Wiig are both talented enough people to find that exact performance as to like how to balance that line. Will Ferrell, another guy who I think gets a little underrated by people, but I mean, not really. He's Will Ferrell. Everybody knows who Will Ferrell is. I just think he's got more range than people give him credit for. But yeah, it's such a strange. I have watched it. It is so strange that it is the thing that exists.
Rounding out our Ghostbusters team is Leslie Jones as Patricia, or Patty, and she's the last to join the team. Leslie Jones, also an SNL alum, and also in the movie Mastermind the same year, along with Kate McKinnon. So, very funny woman. She was in Coming to America, the Coming to America sequel. Perfectly not confusing. Coming to the Arabic number 2 America. You get it. The sequel that they made that went straight to streaming. A movie that I thought was hilarious. I very much enjoyed it, and I enjoyed her role in it. I've enjoyed her in everything I've seen her in.
I agree. I think she was another one that really kind of saw this, not necessarily saw it as an opportunity, but this movie was an opportunity for, and she knocked it out of the park. I think this was kind of another situation where you had her kind of being one of the unknown quantities, and she crushed it. She's fantastic. I watch things she's in now because of having seen her in this movie. And now she's out there doing all sorts of stuff. She's the host of Supermarket Sweep now, man. It doesn't get any bigger than that.
I didn't know there was a modern Supermarket Sweep. That's awesome.
There is now.
Chris Hemsworth plays Kevin, the secretary for the group. And by golly, he is pretty funny. Here in the year 2022, we all know Chris Hemsworth is a hilarious human being, but at this point, he is almost 100% known for being Thor in the first 2 movies, and Avengers, and Ragnarok hasn't come out yet. So he is the straightforward Norse god, big buff action hero, Chris Hemsworth. And then you see him in Ghostbusters, where he is a thick-rimmed glasses-wearing secretary and is dumb as a box of rocks. But darn it, he looks cute. And man, if Kate McKinnon has all my favorite funny lines, he might be number 2. His delivery and matter-of-fact delivery on some of the dumb stuff that he says absolutely crushes me.
I have a bit of a hot take for you, Chris. Are you ready for it?
Let's bring it on.
If this movie does not come out, Thor Ragnarok doesn't happen as we know it. I think this is the movie, a little bit combined with the Vacation reboot from 2015, which was another maligned late stage follow up. He's got a bit part in that, but obviously a much deeper, meatier part here. Emphasis on meat. Because that dude's cut. But I think those are the 2 things back to back that really kind of showed, oh, wait, he's funny. And he can be funny. And there's a charisma there, because he was always kind of the odd one out of the big 3 of the Avengers. Like, Downey was Iron Man from day one. Evans came into Cap pretty quickly, too. Hemsworth was always kind of that odd one, where it was like, he's fine, but like I never really associated him with the character. And Ragnarok is really the movie that changes that. But I do genuinely feel that if it is not for his performance here, they don't go that way with Thor Ragnarok. So that's my hot take, folks.
Hot take indeed, but I don't necessarily think you're wrong. Now, I think the comedy chops were always with Chris Hemsworth, but yeah, this really puts it front and center. Because, like, he has a prominent role in Cabin in the Woods, which is a pretty comedic movie. Now, his character isn't outwardly comedic, but the fact that he plays a stereotypical jock is kind of the joke, a bit of a meta type way. So he has the sense of humor. He's always got it. But this really allowed him to put those chops front and center. And man, like when he's presenting his ideas for a Ghostbusters logo, and one of them is just a hot dog over a house, and they're like, how is that a Ghostbusters? Like, well, the floating hot dog implies it's being held by a ghost. And it's just so matter of fact that it's
so matter of fact. He says it like, well, obviously it's meaning this. He is always making me laugh in this movie. And he's odd because like I realized looking at his filmography that like I remember him being in Star Trek, the first of the '09 reboot, where he's in like the first 5 minutes, and I actually remember A Perfect Getaway, which was a kind of thriller he was in. He's got a real bit part in it, but it's a weird mystery thriller with Timothy Olyphant, Mila Jovovich, Steve Zahn, and Kylie Sanchez, which I highly recommend to people. I mean, it's Timothy Olyphant and Steve Zahn together, so I don't know why you would doubt it, but he's got a bit part in that, so he's always kind of been around, and I've always liked him, but and in Vacation, it really is just a bit part, and it's meant to be funny, but it's not an overtly comedic performance. But with Ghostbusters, I was genuinely like, I was like, this is possibly the most personality he's ever gotten to show like on screen in a character. And like I said, I've been following for a long time. I saw Black Hat, the Michael Mann thriller he was in that nobody understands, including Michael Mann.
Hey, rewind a little bit. What was that recommendation you made, the Timothy Olyphant movie?
It's called A Perfect Getaway.
A Perfect Getaway. So you're telling me there's a movie out there with Timothy Olyphant and Chris Hemsworth on screen at the same time?
I actually don't know if they're on screen at the same time. I don't remember, but they're both in it.
I don't think the camera could contain it. I don't think that would be possible.
I don't think so either. But
off the charts.
But yeah.
All right.
2009, man.
We have a ton of supporting cast and bit parts filled out by comedic actors and character actors. I don't think we need to go through all of them. I don't think we have time to go through all of them, but a few shout outs here. We have to acknowledge our villain of the movie. Neil Casey plays Rowan, who is a bit of a outcast, recluse, pariah. Nobody wants anything to do with him. And he's the guy that spends too much time by himself in mom's basement is kind of like the character they're going for here, and he plays it very well. He looks and sounds creepy and unnerving. He sells it very well. I like that this movie gives the Ghostbusters like a nemesis. That's kind of a wrinkle that we've never really seen before. All of their villains or evil they have to come against is just like, well, this is our job. We've got to go and fight evil. But he specifically targets the Ghostbusters and is, like I said, like they're like a superhero villain and nemesis. And I thought that was a cool sort of twist on the formula.
I agree. You get a little bit of that in Ghostbusters 2, where you've got kind of the lackey of Vigo that's kind of specifically targeting, but it's not really the Ghostbusters that get targeted. It's a specific thing for a specific purpose. So giving the Ghostbusters an actual villain was a wrinkle that I really liked. And he gets, it's a very unsettling performance, and he does a great job with it. Neil Casey has done all sorts of things. He's also written a lot of things. He was a writer on Saturday Night Live for several years. And he's been acting in everything. Still out there working, still doing stuff. But he's doing a great job here portraying a particularly specific type of man with some specific frustrations.
Yes. Andy Garcia. Andy frickin' Garcia is in this movie as the mayor. And he's got a total of like maybe 4 or 5 scenes. He's not in it a ton.
Yeah, not a lot.
But it's Andy Garcia. He's got a presence. He just brings so much with him just by being in this movie. And by golly, Andy Garcia is a funny human being. And I love his style of comedy because he's a super serious actor. He's been in tons of serious roles. He's a great gangster, a mob boss, and villain and bad guy. But whenever he's in a comedy, he does like the exact same thing, but drop him in a comedy, and all of a sudden everything he says and does is funny. And I love that style of comedy. I'm reminded of he's in Ocean's 11, very serious role. And then he comes back for Ocean's 13 playing the same role, but now it's hilarious because he's now part of the team, but still trying to be suave and cool. And there's that scene from the trailer where George Clooney asks him, "Are you ready?" And Andy Garcia's looked in the mirror and he goes, "I was born ready." And then walks off camera, and George Clooney just rolls his eyes at the way he's acting.
Yeah.
I love that. You just bring this fully formed Andy Garcia, drop him in a comedy, and boom. It's hilarious. He's like the ultimate straight man for all the wackiness around him. It's great.
Absolutely. He even has a bit part in Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar that I think is hilarious. Where he plays Tommy Bahama. But he's Andy Garcia. Like this guy was in The Godfather. Godfather Part 3. I mean, he's been everywhere, he does everything, but he's that guy too where you kind of look at him and you may not think that funny is kind of what he does or what he's capable of, but then you watch him in the situations and you're like, oh, he's fantastic at this. He's Andy Garcia. Like I said, he's not in a lot of scenes, very similar to the mayor from the first Ghostbusters or the other Ghostbusters, where there's only a couple of scenes, usually for the mayor to just be like, I can't believe this is happening. Call the Ghostbusters. But yeah, he's fantastic. Can't go wrong.
There's also a few key scenes that show he is not the brightest. I mean, he's a politician in a comedy. They're going to make him dumb. And they do. I highlighted this back on Predator 2. One of my favorite style of jokes where you start a scene and the characters are in the middle of a conversation and you just catch the tail end of it. And it's hilarious. And it cuts to him at dinner in a restaurant with his assistant. And he's like, yeah, I can't believe they cut that woman in half. And she's like, no, it was a magic show. He's like, but he sawed her in half. There was 2 women in the box. And then it moves on with the scene. And then Kirsten Wiig shows up. And it's like, she was just trying to explain to him it was a magic trick.
Illusions, Chris.
Speaking of his assistant, that is Cicely Strong, playing the role of Jennifer Lynch, who is clearly the intelligent one and the one running things, but he's kind of just the face for it. And she's hilarious. She is very condescending to our Ghostbusters, very appreciative face-to-face with them, but whenever she's in front of the public, she has to call them idiots and besmirch them to save the stupid people of New York so they can't know the truth. And she's very good at doing that sort of dual role there.
She literally says it right to their face. She's like, thank you for all your help. Now I have to go vilify you in the press. It's straight up now we have to escort you out in handcuffs just to make it look good. Just genuinely for her, that's just the second nature of it. But yeah, she's doing a great job here. Again, just a few key scenes, but making the most of every moment. Michael K. Williams is randomly in this movie. The man himself, Omar from The Wire, just plays one of our FBI agents or just agent, I think they're called. I'm not sure if they're with the FBI or not. But him and Matt Walsh play Homeland Security. That's right. Him and Matt Walsh play 2 Homeland Security agents that are kind of working on the government side of it, where they want to keep all this quiet. Charles Dance, one of the greatest actors of all time, shows up as Aaron's boss, kind of at the beginning of the film. I got to hear Charles Dance say the word Reddit, which I thought was something I'd never see in my life. There's obviously Ed Begley Jr. has a brief cameo. Zach Woods, also from The Office, has a brief cameo. There's tons of brief little things. Sam Richardson, Toby Huss, Michael McDonald, pretty much anybody that's a lot of people. The brief cameos are people that you will have seen. But I feel like it has to be acknowledged that most of our remaining Ghostbusters all make some kind of appearance in the film as well, which I thought was very cool.
Yeah, and they go beyond the Ghostbusters. They're bringing back a lot of original cast members to make their bit appearances, and we'll talk about it on the scenes. Before we move on from the cast, just got to go to a quick R.I.P. Michael K. Williams tragically did pass away last year, but The cast is just phenomenal, and you can tell this movie is a comedy, right? Kind of contrasted a little bit with that first movie, which is still a comedy. I'm not going to go as far as to say it's some kind of action or drama. It's a comedy, but it's very different. That first movie is like, this is a serious, normal New York, and look at these wacky ghosts, and look at these dry-witted characters bouncing off a bunch of straight men. Whereas this movie, the jokes aren't just coming from our ghost and our Ghostbusters. Everybody in this universe is funny and making jokes, and the movie's always trying to make you laugh with every chance that it gets. It is a comedy through and through.
The way the first Ghostbusters gets described is that it's comedians dropped into kind of a horror world, honestly. Like, the situation is very grim, and the world is not funny, necessarily. It's very much, like you said, it's New York City. What is happening is genuinely unsettling and scary and could potentially end the world, and your comedy comes from your lead character. Whereas, like you said, in this one, it's very much a comedy. Everybody is funny. Everybody's making jokes. If it's matching anything more in tone, it's probably closer to the real Ghostbusters cartoon, where obviously that was a lot more slapsticky and had a lot more comedy. But at the same time, I don't think I would have wanted them to try to create the same dynamic, so I'm glad they found a different way to take it.
I agree, and let's talk about where they took it, Andrew, by jumping into the scenes of this movie, specifically the best scenes of the film, starting with our favorite. Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Ghostbusters?
My favorite scene is probably the sequence that kind of begins right after Rowan basically, his plan succeeds. He basically activates his machine, breaks down the barriers between the spectral realm and the human realm, and the world is basically flooded with ghosts, in which our characters all suit up and end up going back and diving into the thick of it, and kind of culminates in that scene where they're kind of surrounded on all sides and they're using all their gadgets and their gear to kind of drive those ghosts back. I think that's really, to me, when you take the ideas that you've been building this whole time and they're essentially fully formed and being presented. Because what I like about this movie is that the technology evolves throughout the movie. The uniforms evolve throughout the movie. This starts very rudimentary and they build up to this. Whereas in Ghostbusters, they very much kind of present themselves. From the first appearance of them as the Ghostbusters, they're fully formed. The gear is the same. It's the same all the way through Afterlife, basically. They have designed this and they're presented as being, we're the Ghostbusters, which is fine. I'm not saying that's a problem. Whereas in this movie, it's a process. And I think that's, again, another way to differentiate it. We start off, the first proton pack in this movie is a whole cart of stuff. It's a whole cart and it still kind of doesn't work. And throughout the course of the film, it gets more streamlined. It gets cooler looking. It gets presented a little bit more akin to how the other Ghostbuster proton pack look. But at this moment, you kind of get them all together using, and they've all got fun side gadgets, which I think is cool too, because throughout, it's like when you're a kid and there's all these tie-ins that are gadgets for something that never actually appeared in the show or movie. This is like, oh, we're bringing them all in. They're actually going to be a thing. And we're
scuba diving Batman or...
Yeah, exactly. Heat ray Batman. I'm like, Batman, I had this Batman with heat rays on his arms. I'm like, I remember him doing that. But it was kind of cool to see those things brought in. And, I remember people were like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I was like, that's the thing that doesn't make sense in a movie about capturing ghosts. But I love all this. And so, it starts off, we get our Stay Puft Marshmallow Man cameo. He's a evil balloon in a parade, and I think that's it was a fun little nod. And then we just get this really cool fight where all of these different ghosts from tons of different eras. You've got pilgrim ghosts, you've got these weird political type ghosts, all these different ghosts from all these different time periods, all kind of trying to pick off the Ghostbusters, and they've got all this cool gear and they're using their proton streams, they're whipping them around all cool. You've got everybody, you've got a ghost shredder, you've got a proton shotgun, all this cool stuff that I've seen fans always be like, man, wouldn't this be cool? And they talk about concepts that are just like these. And here they were. So to actually see them kind of realized and brought on screen was awesome. And to kind of finally see the Ghostbusters in their full kind of final form, as it were, I think was additionally just really cool. And I think the effects here are awesome. It's one of the things I really like about this movie is the way they do the ghosts. It's distinct from what came before. It definitely plays into the tone of the film, but I just really love the way it looks. I think the effects work on this movie is, there's a lot of practical effects on the first Ghostbusters just by necessity because of the fact it was made in 1984. But with this, it is obviously a lot of CGI, but I think there's a lot of real people beneath the ghost performances. And I think the effects they opt to use just look fantastic. So it creates this really dynamic, fun action sequence where you get to see the Ghostbusters banishing all these ghosts as they kind of battle their way forward to get to Rowan and kind of his kind of the next stage of his plan. And yeah, this scene is just awesome. Like they're doing like a version of the Ghostbuster theme song is blaring in the background through some of it. And it was just awesome. I remember watching this in the theater and it still sticks in my brain just how cool it was to watch this.
This movie is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it's great to see in theaters. It's great to watch in 4K with your HDR blasting. Like the colors are fantastic.
Vivid,
from their streams to the ghosts themselves, all look like they're made of light, and they'll have their own distinct color and glow. And I love the visual style of this movie, and it really comes to a head in the scene that you're talking here in this finale with the big showdown with the giant ghost and fighting the Ghostbusters logo incarnate. Man, that thing is creepy looking. Once it's in 3D and stuff.
I love that sequence where he starts as the cute one and then he gets all big and she's like, I said cute!
It looks like a giant Oogie Boogie from Nightmare
Yeah,
Before
my
Christmas.
God. He really does. It's genuinely like horrifying. But yeah, this whole sequence is just cool the way, because you don't even get anything like this in the first two Ghostbusters. And part of that's just necessity again, because you're dealing with limitations on just what is capable and what you're able to do. But with those two movies, you've got sequences set at kind of set locations, whereas this is like the entire city is kind of cloaked in this kind of invasion, and I just think it looks really awesome. And that's not to say, again, that's not meant as backhanded to the first two. Like Ghostbusters 2 has a very fun sequence where they're showing the paranormal activity throughout the city, where a woman's fur coat like comes to life while she's wearing it and like runs off, and weird things like that. So like obviously you work with what you've got and you make it creative, but just the use of effects in this is just fantastic. It's exactly what I think the next stage of this should look like.
This era of like blockbuster, the mid 2010s, it's so weird.
I was gonna say, you talk about this era like it wasn't 6 years ago.
But it's different. Like it is distinct. It reminds the look of this movie and its use of color and how crisp the CG looks reminds me of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Another movie set in New York. It uses color very well, and the effects when we covered that episode, covered that movie on the show, hold up tremendously. That movie still looks amazing. Like I'm not even at this point, I'm not talking about quality of either of these movies right now. Just visually, they look very much like they're from the mid 2010s and still look amazing today. I think maybe we peaked then, and we've gone too far now. We need to pull it back. There's too many floating heads and suits right now. Let's pull back the CG and mix it practical. Of course, these two examples I'm pulling out are very expensive movies as well, and that plays into it very well. Plays into it a lot, of course.
I just did want to give a shout out to the cinematographer of this film. I think he plays a big part in a lot of how this ends up looking, and that's a guy named Robert Yeoman, who's been working in various capacities since the 80s. He worked with William Friedkin on To Live and Die in L.A. He's worked with Wes Anderson on pretty much everything he's done since Bottle Rocket. Did Dogma with Kevin Smith. He did Red Eye with Wes Craven, which is a particular favorite of mine, another underrated one. Then also did The Heat and Spy with Paul Feig. And so there's obviously a good working relationship there. But and he was actually an additional photographer on Terminator, going back even further. But he's fantastic. And I just wanted to give him a shout out because I think he's got a big part in how this movie looks. And I think he's, the cinematographer goes underrated sometimes, but it's not an easy job. And I think he's definitely part of the look of this movie. And like I said, he's been doing great work for a long time, but I think this was no exception.
Yeah, good shout out. The movie looks gorgeous. Good pick for best scene. I mean, the finale's movie, the big fight, it really delivers. And awesome pick. Andrew, my favorite scene of Ghostbusters, it's about 4 seconds long. Kate McKinnon says that she almost forgot about her new weapons, and then she pulls out her gun and she licks it and says, "Let's go." That scene really does
it's
it
a great
for me.
scene.
But to pick a bit longer scene, I'm gonna rewind a little bit. I'm gonna go with the sort of the first public showcase of the Ghostbusters at the Ozzy Osbourne concert at the theater. I like this a lot. It really shows you everything that's great about Ghostbusters as a concept, everything that's great about this team specifically and their dynamic, and like I said, the first public showing and the public reception of them. So when they arrive at the theater, first off, quick shout out, we see a line of people waiting to get into this metal show where Ozzy is headlining. That line of extras is extremely accurate. If you've ever been to a metal show, looks just like the people they cast in this line. Just throwing that out there. Very good. This is where Michael McDonald comes into play. Yes. I know Michael McDonald from Mad TV. I'm sure most people first saw him. Stewart, plenty of other characters. One of my favorite cast members on that show. Always hilarious. His joke here is that he says that he has a very distinct scream, I think is how he says it. And then later, when the ghost shows up, you get to hear a scream, and it's distinct. It's absurd. But it's great. I love the tone of this movie is so consistent. It's always it's comedy through and through. It's always trying to make you laugh. It knows this concept is absurd. And I think because of that, it can get away with some really creepy stuff for a family-friendly PG-13 movie. We see the room of mannequins, and Patty's like, "Nope, I'm not walking in there," and she just leaves. But one of the mannequins turns his head and then follows after her. That's really creepy. In a different movie, in different context, that would be a legit horrifying scene. And they can really push the limits. There's some scenes here, some jump scares where I'm like, all right, that's genuinely kind of creepy. But because they keep the tone so light, it all works so well. The scene ends with the big dragon-looking ghost that sort of invades the actual concert that's going on and ends up on Patty's shoulders in a very funny, lighthearted scene. It's
very, very funny.
It's good. Like I said, it's everything I like about this movie can be found in this scene. It's really a proof of concept for a new Ghostbusters team, and I think it delivers on it 100%. It's the first time you see them in their new costumes, which are very simple but look awesome.
Well, they're even explained. Patty's I got these from her job at the subway station. She's these are literally, so if we get slimed again, we don't ruin our actual clothes. It's a practical thing.
I really like, this is an origin story through and through. They show you how they got their name, how they got the logo, these costumes. And if the first Ghostbusters movie had already done that, I would be all right, this is a little redundant. But because they were fully formed, that first one, like you said, doing an origin story is fresh and new, and it's fun. And we know what their logo is gonna look like, but it's cool to see how it comes about. I thought that was a pretty cool touch.
I agree. I think that it's a cool way to go about it. Like I said, everything from the logo to everything. Because in Ghostbusters, like you said, or like I said, they just appear really. And that's fine, because when they appear, they look awesome. And it's a design and a look that's been imitated and recreated in various capacities for almost 40 years now. Ugh. But that's a long time. So with here, I like that, like you said, they were taking some time. Like you said, they get a hearse, but it's a different kind of hearse, and it's built out differently, and they get their equipment, but it's a different path. And I just like all of that. I think it's a really cool way to go about that. Especially since like you can't do that really with the originals now. Like you can't go back and tell that story without kind of
Right.
seeming cliche or whatever. So to kind of see a version of that here where all of the pieces are put together kind of in real time, I think is a very cool thing to see. So I agree.
And then, of course, it ends with they're up on the stage, and Kate McKinnon's so pumped from capturing the ghost that she takes the guitarist's guitar, smashes it on the ground, and hands it back to him and says, "Sorry, I can't buy you another one." I found myself writing down just so much of Kate McKinnon's dialogue because it all works for me. And, Andrew, to make sure that I'm not just quoting Kate McKinnon the entire episode, I have rounded up Kate McKinnon's top 5 moments in Ghostbusters. All right, let me find some clack my cards here.
Let me find my piano keyboard here.
All right, number 5. Whenever they meet their first ghost, is a very serious moment where all the characters are like, wow, we just saw a ghost. And then you hear crunching, and she's eating some Pringles. And they ask her, really, at a time like this? And she says, you try saying no to these salty parabolas. Salty parabolas. Andrew, that's what I'm calling Pringles from now on.
That's what they are.
All right. Number 4. At the very end of this movie, after the climax, the team is at a diner reflecting on everything that they've gone through. And Kate McKinnon, who has been all about the nerdy stuff and the gadgets and the mission the entire movie, gets a little vulnerable. She gives a speech, a very emotional speech about how she's always been an outcast. But then with Abby, she finally had a friend, and now she has a family, and it's very sweet and very hard for her to deliver, very awkward. And she immediately sits down and puts her head down. And Patty says, wow, that was like some real stuff. And Kate McKinnon goes, oh! Most of this list is Kate McKinnon making noises, but that's number 4. Number 3. Number 3 is when they called into the mayor's office, and they're told that, well, we're worried that you're drawing a lot of attention to yourselves. And Kate McKinnon says, what? Hang on, let's roll right into number 2 because it's so similar. She's showing the new weapons to the team of Ghostbusters, and she tells them, pick a gun, any gun. And Kirsten Wiig goes to grab one, and Kate McKinnon goes, no, not that one. Oh my god. And then the last one isn't anything I can recreate on this microphone or poorly try to. It is whenever they first get into their headquarters. It's just like they just rolled the camera and just said, hey, Kate McKinnon, just be amazing. And it's Kristen Wiig just looking at Kate McKinnon like at her workbench. And it keeps cutting back and forth to Kristen Wiig's like a reaction, and Kate McKinnon just like putting on like a silent show as she like makes these weird faces and weird noises and tinkers with things, and then it sets on fire. And Kristen's like, "Oh, it's on fire!" And Kate McKinnon does a twirl and grabs the fire extinguisher and makes her way to the fire and puts it out. And then she mimes like she's walking downstairs. It's just like a 2-minute. Here's Kate McKinnon being the greatest human being on earth. And my note literally says, it's worth me editing in a bleep here. It says, I fucking love Kate McKinnon. It's just, it's great. It's her best moment in this movie. In my opinion, the number 1 Kate McKinnon moment in Ghostbusters.
Beautiful.
Good stuff.
No, these are all fantastic choices. She's just every scene, like I said, she's making the most of it. Even like the brief like throwaway lines. I do like the line where they're in the concert and they're walking around backstage and Kristen Wiig's character kind of walks by and she's just sitting there in like the weird wig and the hat with a creepy look on her face. And Kristen Wiig is just like, "Dah!" And she's like, it's like, is it the wig? She's like, sorry, is it the wig or the hat? Is it the wig or the hat? Like, just like, which one is it? It's but she's great. She's fantastic. Worth the price of admission alone. Literally, if there's nothing
100%.
else you're going to watch this movie for, you watch it for what she's doing. I do want to call out to our original group of Ghostbusters cast members that do show up here. They all get so we have Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Ernie Hudson all appear in varying capacities. Sigourney Weaver, Annie Potts getting in on the action as well. Ivan
Sigourney
Reitman
Weaver
also,
mid-credits, man. You know your movie is packed whenever Sigourney Weaver doesn't show up until mid-credits.
let's just say that's a bit of a pattern. But draw your own conclusions. But but really, the movie is packed. And even Ivan Reitman does get a cameo as well. He's got a cameo as one of the passerbys in one of the street scenes, and then even and Harold Ramis' son Daniel cameos as one of the metal fans at the concert. And but Bill Murray gets kind of the most involved of our cameo roles, playing a paranormal debunker / doubter named Martin Heiss. Bill Murray was a noted proponent of this film. He thought everybody involved was really funny, and when people would ask him, why did you cameo in it? And he's like, I thought, it was a funny movie with funny people. Why not? So he plays a debunker that the Ghostbusters are kind of, more specifically, Aaron Gilbert is a little too eager to prove that what they're doing is not fake, and ends up inadvertently mortally killing the man.
And we just move on from that.
Yeah,
It's
like
such a
it never there was a tie-in book that got released that implied he survived, but I don't count that because it's not on
He's
screen.
dead.
It doesn't count. But yeah, it was a very it's still he's being Bill Murray. He's being funny, being the kind of playing against it. In the original Ghostbusters, he's kind of the cynical one who's kind of like, all right, sure, we'll be Ghostbusters, whatever. Like, he's all, he sees it, and it's not that he doesn't believe it, but he's the one that's kind of, the franchise rights alone will make us rich beyond our wildest dreams. Like, he's that guy thinking about it. So to see him here is kind of the full-on polar opposite of, not just is this not real, I don't believe, you can't prove me otherwise. It was a fun little twist, and it was good to see Bill Murray. But Dan Aykroyd does have a brief appearance as a cab driver. I like this cameo a little bit just because he shows up kind of when everything's already gone wrong, and he's not fazed by any of it. He's just kind of like, she's like, there's ghosts everywhere. And he's like, they're just free-floating vapors. And she's like, take me to Chinatown. And he's like, that's like 1 block further south than I want to go. Like, he's just not having it. He's listening.
And the last line he has of, I don't drive to Chinatown, I don't drive wackos, and I ain't afraid of no ghosts. I mean,
perfect.
It's on the nose. It's a line from the song, but I think it lands. Yeah, I agree.
I think it does. Ernie Hudson gets, I like his cameo too, where he shows up as Patty's uncle that she gets the hearse from, and he's just like, where's the car? Like, what have you done with my car? Where is it? What's going on? And I gotta say, shout out to Ernie Hudson. That man doesn't age. He's 76. So he was 70 when this movie came out, and he's 76. He's 75 in the new one that just came out, and my God, that man looks 50 tops. So Ernie Hudson's got the stuff. But and then 2 smaller ones. Annie Potts gets to play another sort of receptionist adjacent character here. Janine Melnitz from the original gets to play the receptionist who's not at all shocked that Rowan is apparently being a weirdo. She's like not at all shocked, and leads the Ghostbusters on their path. And then Sigourney Weaver also gets a very fun cameo as Holtzman's mentor, Dr. Rebecca Gorin, who comments on how dangerous and unstable everything Holtzman is doing is, to which they share a laugh and don't seem very much concerned about it all. But these are all fun. I like when characters can kind of come in and lend their authenticity or their approval or their whatever you want to call it to a film, and none of these are done in such a way that I think they're jarring. I know there's definitely movies where they work in the cameos and it's a little much, where you're just kind of like, all right, I get it. These guys were in these people were in a previous version, but I think all these work for the most part, and I think they're all really fun, and it was just good to see them all in some at the time. Because for me as a fan, when Harold Ramis passed, I pretty much accepted that was the end of that version of Ghostbusters. They had been trying for many, many years to make a Ghostbusters 3, and it never happened. And when Harold Ramis very unfortunately passed away, to me, I kind of accepted that was, like I said, that was the end of that version of Ghostbusters. Obviously, that ended up not being the case. The new movie, I think, does do a pretty good job of trying to honor his legacy. But, so especially more so when they announced this, I was just happy to also see the franchise kind of living on, even if it meant kind of a whole new thing, which at the time, I couldn't really imagine Ghostbusters without Harold Ramis. So I was more than happy to see a new version where they weren't even going to try to have to deal with that. But it was nice to see them all involved. I remember all of them were kind of on one of the late night shows. It might have been Jimmy Kimmel, and they just all looked like they were having a blast, and it was just fun to see.
Yeah, I agree. It's all incorporated very well. It's cool to see him back in this capacity, and just by virtue of having these cameos that are like legit cameos with speaking parts, especially in case Bill Murray, it's all them like giving their blessing to this new version, and that means something, right? That original cast doing that, it means something, and it's very nice.
Certainly didn't have to.
Absolutely.
No Rick Moranis, but what can you do? He doesn't do anything.
He's retired. It's okay. Let him.
He's coming back. He's coming back.
Well, in 2016, they were honoring his retirement, and I'm okay with that. I assume that's what happened.
I am too. I assume, yeah.
I almost used this line in my intro, but whenever they read comments on the internet, one of them is, "Ain't no bitch gonna hunt no ghosts." Really on the nose. It's clear what they're doing there, but I thought
I'm sure that was taken
funny.
straight from somewhere.
Yeah. Yes. Andrew, look, this movie is so funny. I don't want to just recite a bunch of jokes in the movie, but that's like all my notes are. I could keep us here all day reciting the whole movie, but I think we've hit the high points. But I mentioned, Kevin, probably my second favorite comedic performance in this movie. How about the fact that he asked if he can bring my cat to work, and they say, "No, I'm allergic to cats." He goes, "Oh, I don't have a cat. I have a dog. His name is Mike Hat." And they go, "First name Mike, last name Hat?" He goes, "Well, his full name is Michael Hat." It's just like an Abbott and Costello routine. Nails it. I also love whenever Bill Murray gets killed, he gets thrown through a window, and in the background, he just pops up and says, "Hey, that man went out the wrong door." Oh,
I love
so
that
funny.
he's got the glasses, and at one point he just reaches through to scratch his eye through the glasses, and she's just like, "Oh no, I've got to ask, no lenses." He's like, "Oh yeah, they just kept getting dirty, so I took them out." And she's like, "Okay,"
just so matter of fact, yeah, obviously they got dirty. I solved the problem. What's the big deal?
I love that about the character, because everything that Kevin does makes perfect sense to Kevin.
To Kevin, yeah.
To Kevin and Kevin alone most of the time. I love when he's got the two pictures and he's like, "Which one of these makes me look like more like a doctor? The one where I'm playing the saxophone, or the one where I'm listening to the saxophone?" And it's like, not just are you listening to a saxophone, but why would either of these make you look more like a doctor?
It's good. Okay, I know I said I wasn't going to recite a bunch of jokes in the movie, but one more. I love whenever Kirsten Wiig is trying to warn the mayor of what's going to happen, and she says, "Please don't be like the mayor in Jaws." And Andy Garcia says, "Don't ever compare me to the mayor in Jaws. Ever!" like it's something that happens all the time.
Or it's just such an offensive thing to him. To be
so personal.
It's the lowest bar possible for mayors, and he never wants to be on there.
Oh, Andrew, this movie is good. Dare I say, it's great. I really love it.
Great.
Man, we acknowledge the backlash, the reason it's here, and all that stuff. But dude, it's awesome. I no hot takes here. I'm not saying this is the best Ghostbusters movie. This is better than the first. Nothing like that. But it's great, and it's such a good update of the concept in the franchise. Like, my daughter's about to turn 12. She has only seen Ghostbusters Afterlife. She saw that in theaters, but she's never seen the other ones. I think she would enjoy this one the most. I think, like, I would have no problem like, showing her the first Ghostbusters. I'm not gonna like force her to watch this one, but like, I think she'd get the most enjoyment out of this one. Like, it's a fun, modern take on the concept, a very meaningful update. Like, you talk about like reboots and remakes, and you talk about the concept of them like justifying themselves, right? Like, if it's a remake, it's the exact same plot. People are like, well, why even remake it? You've got the original, and I think there's some, validity to that. Or you do a reboot, and it's like, well, it's sort of the same concepts, but they just changed this, this, and this, and this is like, this checks every box for me on like how to do a reboot. You take the concept, take the core idea. You bring it to modern times. You don't try to retell the original. You let the original be the original. You let the reboot be the reboot and stand on its own. It doesn't try to outdo the original by any means. It's its own thing. And the end result is pretty damn awesome.
I agree. And I think that I really wish more people understood that aspect, that this movie actually means a lot to a lot of people because of that. Some of these base concepts. Like, my sister loves this movie. Like, if my sister is going to watch a Ghostbusters movie, she's going to watch this one. And my sister is older than I am. And this is a movie that she can go back to all the time because it's such a... Like, the movies like Bridesmaids and stuff like that they hit for her in a big way because for a long time, women, especially in like, you look back at some of those 80s, 90s comedy films, the women aren't treated the best. And that's not, I'm not trying to backhand anybody. That's just, it was very much a trend at the time. And so to have these kind of high profile, big time blockbuster movies starring women that are just being Ghostbusters, she's like, this is awesome. And why would I not want to watch this all the time? Especially since it, as we have established, is hilarious. I was at a show in Baltimore once, a comic convention, and there was a whole group of girls dressed as these characters. And it's like,
it's awesome.
I ain't going to stand in the way of that. I'm not going to mess with that. Like, why? Who am I to say this is not Ghostbusters? It's, it's all Ghostbusters. And it's just so funny. It's genuinely like, I can't watch this movie and not just like die laughing. There's so much funny stuff in this movie. It's just genuinely a great cast, a great team that put together a great movie.
Yeah, I hate that you can't. I mean, I hope we did a great job doing a positive take on this movie and doing our thing. But like, you have to acknowledge that backlash. I hate that the Wikipedia page for this movie has a section called controversy. Like, there's nothing controversial about this movie. It's a great movie, but it gets that reaction is just part of its legacy, and that drives me nuts for a number of reasons. I hate that it's not even just like fans and a vocal minority on the internet. Andrew, they released this Ghostbusters collection last year for the franchise, big collectible, and left this movie out until there was a backlash and they gave you a digital copy, like a compromise. But the plan was clearly to ignore that this movie exists. And I hate that. I hate that this movie got judged on stuff it shouldn't be judged on. I hate that it wasn't a massive success. I hate that we don't have 3 sequels with this team because it's so damn good. Hashtag PP. This movie rules.
I agree. And this is coming from somebody who liked Ghostbusters Afterlife. Ghostbusters Afterlife is a movie that it knows who its audience is, and it plays to that audience very heavily. And it in no way goes out of its way. I mean, the lead of Ghostbusters Afterlife is a young girl. So it's a movie that definitely is still trying to expand the reach of what this franchise is and what it can be. But it was very disheartening to kind of see this kind of fall off so quickly at the box office. I was really hyped for it. I did a whole gag. I wore my suit. I wore my old suit, and I was fine with it. It was the one where I put the stuffed Stay Puft in the baby carrier. I don't know if you remember when I did that. But
we have pictures of that we can put on social, Andrew.
Yeah, we do.
All right.
made my socials think I was having a kid, and surprise, it's just a Stay Puft and a baby carrier. But yeah, I can send you those. But yeah, it was a blast. I had so much fun watching it. I've had Liz watch this off and on with me before. She's just kind of been like, oh wow, this looks, everything she's seen, she's like, this looks great. And if you haven't seen this and kind of have just kind of been hemming and hawing on it, I really do suggest giving it a shot. If only for Kate McKinnon. Like, I think there's really like that performance alone is worth the price of admission. But like, obviously, if the style of comedy is not for you, the style of comedy has not shifted. And since the movie was released, it's still the same. But I think it's worth another look. Maybe if you're willing to give it one, I think you will find yourself being rewarded. I do take some solace that these characters have continued to, or did live on to a degree, in the IDW Ghostbuster comics that they did. They did a crossover series where essentially the Answer the Call, as they're called, the group of cast in this movie, this is kind of called Ghostbusters Answer the Call to kind of separate it from Ghostbusters. They end up teaming up with what are essentially the movie Ghostbusters in a crossover. That's an interdimensional Ghostbusters thing, because this is Ghostbusters. Why not? Like, there's absolutely zero reason something like that can't happen. And then that did lead to a 5-issue series that continued these characters as well. IDW's Ghostbuster comics seem to have gone away. I believe that license is headed over to Dark Horse soon. But hopefully these things see a reprint down the line. There was a big ongoing IDW Ghostbuster story by Dan Schoening and Eric Burnham for a long time, and they did a fantastic job continuing on the legacy of Ghostbusters, and I think they did a really nice job, especially in that crossover, of paying tribute to these characters, and kind of giving them a big high-profile thing to tie into that series. So I am glad that it has continued to live on to some degree. Obviously, it's it's not 4 sequels and a crossover, which you could have done, but I will be happy for what we got.
Andrew, I got a question for you.
Sure you do.
Who are you going to call?
Somebody else. No.
Do you like that when I put all the pressure on you to be funny? I just do the setup and it's just...
It's like, Andrew, come up with a punchline. So repeat the dumb punchline from Casper. I was trying to remember what they first called themselves, the conductors of the metaphysical examination, but I forgot what it was until I just looked it up. So, you say Casper? Right. What a weird movie.
Yeah, all those cameos. Yeah. But you know what? Appropriately, we're bringing up Casper here because let me read to you the question of the week this week. This comes from our Discord, and this week it was submitted by Mike Lynch, who says, #PP, but is there a movie from your childhood that was certified fresh in your memory, but was most certainly rotten when you revisited it? Very good question, Mike Lynch. I have not revisited Casper, but I liked it a lot as a kid. And I've seen the Rotten Tomato score, and I'm curious if I rewatched it now, how I would feel about it.
An excellent question.
But is there some childhood movies you've revisited? I will say, like, I don't want to go too hard. It's hashtag positive podcast, like Mike mentioned there. But like one that I did revisit. It's been a minute now, but I revisited as an adult was The Mighty Ducks, which I loved as a kid. I loved the whole franchise. I loved the Bash Brothers. Like I loved these kids were so cool. And then I watched that first one as an adult. And I'm like, oh, this is like a melodramatic drama about Coach Bombay, and it's very by the numbers and not the best this sports redemption story has done. It is. I saw it a different way. As a kid, you're relating to the kids on the ice and the personalities and the cool, and you want to skate alongside them. But you watch that first movie as an adult, and you're not relating to the kids anymore. You kind of see the structure of the story for what it is, and it wasn't a great rewatch for me, Andrew.
Oh man, you're disrespecting my hockey legacy now. But no, I can see that. It's because that's an interesting thing about movies that just happens and you don't even really intend for it, is that you're kind of the character you kind of visualize yourself at changes over time, and your relationship with the movie can change depending on like where you are in life at the time. Like if I watch Superman the movie now, the OG Christopher Reeve, all the distant family stuff where Jor-El is telling him like about his future and what he's capable of, all of that like punches me in the gut now because I don't live near my family, and so the idea of like a distant family that's out of reach hits me harder now than it would have 8 years ago. So watching Mighty Ducks now and seeing my future as a drunk lawyer would be very jarring. But no, I do agree. I can definitely see that. The one I want to shout out is it's this movie I watched as a kid, and my brother's a huge fan of it. He watched it like daily, started literally calling himself after one of the characters in the movie. And then I rewatched it as an adult, and I was just like, woo. And it's a movie called Three Ninjas.
Wait a minute.
Sorry.
How dare you? Besmirch the good name of Three Ninjas.
I'm sorry. I saw the opening and had to take it.
I think that qualifies, though. That's definitely Andrew,
like
true story. I used to have some fish as a kid. I had 3 fish. They were named Rocky, Colt, and Tum Tum because
Beautiful.
I loved Three Ninjas so much. But that's one as a kid. You relate to the kids and like you want to be a ninja training alongside them and stuff. But you watch it as an adult and you're like, okay, woof. I mean, like I can still watch Three Ninjas and get a lot of enjoyment.
Sure,
out of it.
yeah.
Had I not grown up with that movie, had I watched it for the first time now, I would not feel the same way about it.
Absolutely.
I think another one in that vein is Hook, the Robin Williams movie,
Yes.
where as a kid, Rufio was the coolest dude in the world. The fight at the end is so fun. You've got the kid that rolls up into a ball, rolls downstairs.
Yeah.
And then you watch it now and you're like, Rufio's a brat, and this kid is clearly holding on to 2 like pant legs stuffed with cotton. Like, what is this?
Hook is such a strange movie. And that was actually one of the ones that was like on my mind too, was Hook, because I remember watching that a lot as a kid. It like maybe Home Alone 2 is another one that definitely, like, as a kid I know I watched that all the time, where it was just like, oh man, Home Alone 2 is on. I had a talk boy, I had the thing that like could record and play my voice back and all that stuff. But like I've rewatched it now and it really just is like a painful like paint by numbers of the first one in a completely different city for no reason. Like it goes back through it. And that's not to say that I still don't watch it every Christmas season. I absolutely do. It's in the rotation. I'm not going to pretend that it's not, but it is definitely something where like when I went back, like kind of, I don't know if I now identify with his parents and are just like, oh wow, we've lost our kid twice now. But it was something where like definitely as an adult I was like, man, there's like really like this is kind of, I hate using this term because it's like it's very much like the first one was a hit, let's get another one out there.
I mean, it was like a year later. That's clearly what happened.
It was very, very quick. And like I know there's movies I enjoyed as a kid. Like I know I watched Turtles 3 as a kid and was like, oh man, it's the Turtles, it's awesome. And like as an adult, like it's like okay. And like stuff like Batman and Robin. I mean, I was like 9 when Batman and Robin came out. I was just psyched to see a Batman movie at the movie theater. Like I know that like I would have come out of that and probably like been laughing at all the corny jokes and just been like, haha, he said a laundry service that delivers. Haha. And like now you're an adult and you're just kind of like, wait, why is he saying that? I don't understand. What's the deal? So I know there's lots of stuff like that where like as a kid I just watched it and just loved it. And I know that like, because I'm a kid, like I don't, I'm not sitting in the back row of the theater with my legal pad just like, well, the theme throughout the course of this film has fallen off several times. The tone is inconsistent. It doesn't seem to be sure what they're trying to go for here. I was just like, Batman.
Yeah, aside
Which, to be
from
fair,
like,
I'm still like that. So it's
aside from like movies as a whole, there's also like specific like parts of a movie. Like for example, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, or what is it called? Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. You know what I mean? The
Yes.
Power Rangers
Yeah, yeah.
movie from the 90s. Like in my head, even still, honestly, when I think of like the final scenes of that movie and Ivan Ooze when he's a giant or when he infuses those metal bugs and then they fight the Zords,
Yeah.
those special effects are awesome. Those giant robots look great. But you actually sit back and watch it and you're like, oh, this is like PS1 cutscenes. Like there are no textures on these robots.
No.
Why are they so shiny? Yeah, it is jarring that CGI.
It is.
But
I also,
but in your head, you know, your
You're a kid, you
child
just think it's
brain just like
awesome.
this is great.
I love the two scenes that like open that movie where they just skydive randomly for no
To
reason.
the Red Hot
I
Chili
can't-
Peppers, yeah.
I can't hear Higher Ground by the Red Hot Chili Peppers without thinking of Jason David Frank like sky surfing for absolutely no reason.
Why does he have a surfboard? What does it do?
I don't know. It's like, what is this doing? Oh, it's just to look cool, but then and then it's immediately followed by this extended rollerblading scene where they just like rollerblade right through a construction site, and you're just like,
Yeah.
guys, this is not allowed. You know that.
To,
like as a
to
kid,
Free Ride is the song.
to
that
Free
plays
Ride
from the rollerblading,
by
yeah.
that's Dan Hartman's version after he left the Edgar Winter Group. There's your fun fact for the day. But yeah, I just remember they and then after I just remember even as a kid, they leave the construction site and then Bulk and Skull land in the construction site. And I was like, how does this work? How is this happening at all? I don't understand. But
Probably the most
yes.
unrealistic part of that movie, Andrew.
yeah, definitely. We definitely lost out by not having Mariska Hargitay as the Dulcia. But yeah, no, that's a movie with a lot
What
of
is
scenes
this?
where
Hang on, what?
she was cast as that character originally.
Is that the character on the other planet where they get the
Yeah.
powers? She has that really cool line. She's like, the ground is littered with the bodies of those who have tried and failed. I just thought that was so badass.
That's
But
still a stone cold line. That's awesome.
I had no idea that was supposed to be Mariska Hargitay. That's funny.
Yeah, it was. She was cast. I forget. I think she got hurt. There was a conflict, or I don't remember exactly why. But I think I don't know if there's photos out there of her like test photos or something. But yeah, she was cast, and then they had to switch it. But I guess that was pre SVU. But yeah, that's definitely a movie that as an adult, when I go back and watch it, there's more than a couple of scenes where I'm like, that was the coolest thing in the world when I was a kid. Now I imagine being on that construction site and just being like, what the heck are you kids doing? Jesus.
Is there a movie from your childhood that maybe doesn't quite hold up? We would like to know about it. This is a fun topic. Great question, Mike Lynch. And give us your answers. Hop into our Discord. There's a link in our show notes. If you haven't joined us already, what are you waiting for? We'll be back next week with another poorly received reboot, diving into all the positives and everything that works. But in the meantime, just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we're going to grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.